Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports, and as promised, here are my 2024 NBA Draft Combine winners and losers. I promised earlier in the week after day one that I would record my overall winners and losers at the end of the week. Here we are now on Friday, and just in time for you guys to enjoy. So if you do really appreciate the content, I've been pumping out a ton of NBA Draft content while still covering the Minnesota Timberwolves for my actual job. Show me some love. Leave a like on today's video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. We just hit 25,000 subscribers, which is ridiculous, bonkers, crazy. I'm super thankful for each and every one of you. Now we're pushing to 30,000, so let's see if we can make a big dent into that number here with this video today. And I'm not going to waste any more of your time. Let's jump into it here now with a video preview. A few years ago, I had a couple of people get upset at me saying, oh my gosh, you're calling these kids losers. No, listen. Winners are players who just helped their draft stock. Losers are players who lost a little bit of draft stock. So that might be someone who we looked at as maybe a lottery pick, who now we know isn't a lottery pick, or who we now know might not even be a first round pick. So we're just talking draft stock. Obviously not actual winners and losers in real life, anything weird like that. Just talking about their draft stock. And then make sure again to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more, and then also go follow us on Twitter. Links in the description for that. I tweet about the NBA even more than I make videos, so that's going to be a great place for you to keep up with all of my thoughts around the NBA, NBA draft, college basketball, EuroLeague, NBL, everything you need to hear from me about basketball. So that's the great place to go and hit that follow button. Let's get into my first winners here. Nikola, Djurisic, and Trentyn Flowers, a couple of guards coming from overseas. Trentyn Flowers obviously from the United States originally, but spent this past year with the Adelaide 36ers. And then Nikola Djurisic coming over from Mega Basket. Something about those Mega Basket Nikolas, they just end up finding good careers in the NBA. Think about Nikola Jokic, Nikola Jovic. Mega Basket produces some pretty good Nikolas, just the way it is. But I think both of them showcase some real functional off-ball scoring in the scrimmages, which is one of the most important things for both of them for different reasons. For Trentyn Flowers, even though there's aspirations that maybe he could grow into and turn into some type of lead guard in even limited capacities, I think for the most part, a majority of his scoring at the NBA level is going to have to come off of the basketball, and I think he showcased that getting out in transition, playing off the catch a bit in the scrimmages. And then Djurisic specifically, someone who I think has some real lead guard capabilities to him, stood out as his ability to play off the catch, get to the rim. He had a couple of nice dunks in these combines as well in the half-court setting, which I think is impressive, especially given the fact that he measured in at 6'7" without shoes on. Nikola Djurisic, I think, was one of the biggest winners of this year's combine, a player coming in where I think there were some real questions on whether or not he would even be a top 35-40 pick in the draft. He has not been in a ton of my mock drafts this year up to this point, but he is trending in that direction to now being a top 25, top 20-ish pick, maybe even if things go right for him. So he had a very good week for himself. Both of these guys flash some of that playmaking. Obviously, Djurisic has a little bit more of a flair for the dramatic and a little bit more pizzazz in his game as a passer. But Trentyn Flowers, I think if you're looking for a comp for Trentyn Flowers that I think he can maybe grow into, it's present-day version of Nickeil Alexander-Walker as a player who's going to make a lot of money defensively with his athleticism, size, and frame, while also having some offensive skills to him as both a catch-and-shoot threat. Trentyn Flowers shot over 40% from three this past year in the NBL with the 36ers, so there's a lot of hope that Flowers can come into the NBA, shoot the ball extremely well like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, while still giving you maybe a little bit of playmaking, a good amount of defense, and then really finding himself as a 3-and-D plus player. And Flowers' athleticism really stood out during the drills as well. Really great vertical jump. He tested very well in that. So Djurisic, Trentyn Flowers, two of my first winners here in this video. Let's talk about another one here in Bronny James. And I think this is going to be a hot button topic. People are going to get upset seeing Bronny James in here. No, I'm not saying he cemented himself as a lottery pick or even a first round pick, anything like that. But what he did do this week, I think, was answer some real questions around his game. He shot the ball very well during drills, didn't necessarily translate to live scrimmages as much, but I think there's a lot of optimism and belief that Bronny James could grow into a quality NBA shooter in a predominantly off-ball role. His wingspan, I think, also helped him a lot. Everyone knew coming in, he wasn't going to be the biggest prospect. I think he's got respectable positional size looking at the other prospects in this class, Devin Carter, Rob Dillingham, Reed Shepard. Bronny James tested in physically in a very similar height class with those prospects who are all likely lottery picks or top 20 picks in this year's draft. We'll see where Devin Carter ends up going. But Bronny James definitely helped himself a ton with that 6'7" wingspan. That's something that separates him from some of those other smaller guards. He's got real plus length to him, and obviously we've seen that in tape as well with his defensive playmaking ability, at times flashing chase down blocks, even going back to his high school film, which I do think is important to evaluate, especially in his case with the cardiac arrest situation where he just didn't have a real healthy season at USC, kind of had to overcome a lot. He made plays both on and off the basketball during scrimmages. I think, obviously we got to see his touch on his floater. The second day of scrimmages, he really came to life a bit. I believe had a 13-point scrimmage performance. So he got to showcase some of his on-ball creativity as well as his ability to fit off the basketball, where if you're drafting Bronny James, you're looking at him as a defensive prospect, a combo guard at best. And I think he showcased some of that ability. And really what he did for me this week was cement himself as a draft worthy prospect, not someone who is a lock to be a first round pick, not saying he's going in the lottery, anything crazy like that. What I'm saying is, now if he goes pick 45 overall, people aren't going to say, oh my gosh. Well, some people will, but people who are actually informed and understand kind of the reality here with who he is as a prospect and some of the potential that he could live up into once he's fully healthy and really gets his feet under his pro career, it's not a crazy idea to draft him in the second round this year. I really don't think that's insane. Just with his overall tape going back to high school, and just who he is as a prospect, I think there's a lot of winning characteristics, winning traits that he possesses, and I think we got to see some of those this week during the combine. And then the shooting upside is definitely there with how he shot it in the drills. Just have to see that translate into a live game. That's something that'll take some time, but I think he made himself a draft-worthy prospect this week in the eyes of a lot of people. Then we move on to my next group of winners, and I want to highlight athletic bigs in here, and a lot of them for different reasons. Kel'el Ware, let's start with him. Measured in very, very well, nearly 7 feet without shoes on. Very impressive combine for him just from a measurements perspective. 7'4.5" wingspan as well. Obviously the physical traits are there on film, so he has a lot of those physical tools. I think he impressed this week with his overall drill work and everything that he took part in from a physical perspective. That's one of the big reasons he's on this graphic for me. Yves Missi, I think, really gained a lot of attention and notoriety and steam this week in his draft evaluation. I think more people are joining the Yves Missi train. I've been mocking him as a really likely first round pick for a very long time on the channel. I've been a big believer in his game. I do think that there's a lot of tools to work with, and I think he was able to showcase that this week. And then Adem Bona is probably the biggest winner of the bunch. If you would have asked me a week ago where I think this kid gets drafted, I would say probably after pick 45. I have not included him in any of my first round mocks up to this point this year, even though I myself am a big believer in his game and have him currently in my top 30. My understanding was that the consensus isn't quite there, which is where the unique aspect of big boards versus mock drafts. All of my mock drafts are very different than my big boards, because even if I really like a guy like I do with Adem Bona, I don't necessarily think that means that kid's going to get drafted in the first round. But I think after this week, there was a real chance a team could have fallen in love with Bona. He has a ton of physical traits that really do impress a lot of people. He jumps out of the gym. He measured in only at about 6'9" without shoes on, but his wingspan was ginormous at 7'4", very comparable to what I just talked about with Kel'el Ware. So I think the physical traits are there with Adem Bona, and then I think he also impressed people during the combine with his overall mobility and his ability to probably work in a variety of defensive coverages. And a lot of that's on film for his 2 years at UCLA. So it wasn't very surprising to me, but I do think just getting in front of a whole bunch of NBA execs and scouts and proving what I already knew to be true was huge for him. I think these three guys, all pretty big winners. Kel'el Ware maybe cementing himself as a near or possible real lottery pick. Yves Missi locked himself into the first round for me, and I think Adem Bona probably crawled into the back end of the first round. Now, that's not a guarantee. It's still very possible he goes in the second round on draft night, but I do think now he'll be a top 45 pick, which is different than what I had believed beforehand, and I think he's a big winner this week because of the combine he had for himself. Winner number 4, I have Baylor Scheierman here. He shot the ball really, really well during drills. I think that's one of the most important aspects of this entire equation for him. if he's going to be on the floor, obviously one key aspect is just how well he shoots it off of other players as a wing, because that's what he projects to be. He shot it very, very well. I think there's a lot of belief that his shot is going to translate very well to the NBA, as it should. He shoots a ton of deep range shots. I believe he led the nation in 25-foot plus threes this past year. I might be mistaken on that, but I know he had a ton of them. Showcased a lot of secondary creation skills as well in live play. He threw up a lob in transition earlier in, I believe, his first scrimmage. Just made a lot of plays off the bounce, and that's something that, again, if you've been watching me for a while, you should know that's not surprising. He ranked in the 100th percentile this past year as a pick-and-roll ball handler, and he's not even a point guard. He's a point forward, wing, Joe Ingles type of player. That's been my comp for him now for about 3 years, back even when he was a jackrabbit playing for South Dakota State. I've been a big believer in his for a long time. I think he has definitely handled his pro career very well, going back to school a couple of times that he has decided to, and now he has placed himself in a spot where he was able to really showcase himself, I think gain a lot of momentum going into this draft cycle because he measured in well from a physicals perspective. He's a respectable 6'7.5", 6'8" with shoes on, and he projects to be a true playmaking wing with those respectable athletic traits. Because of course, you look at him and you're saying, okay, he's probably not the most athletic guy in the world. But he did throw down a couple of dunks. I think just from a physical, athletic perspective, not only did his skills showcase themselves very well this week, but I think he backed up some of the athletic questions with good answers as well. So Baylor Scheierman, one of my biggest winners from the Combine, a player who I do not have a graphic for, but I do want to highlight, Enrique Freeman, had a really great week for himself as well. I have to mention him in the video. I'm not sure exactly what that's going to do with his draft stock yet, which is why I don't necessarily have him with a graphic. But Enrique Freeman had a great week for himself. I do need to say that. But then my winner number 5 here, my biggest winner, is Edey, who really blew out the Combine. Obviously measured in extremely well. You see from my Twitter here, his measurements, 7'4", height without shoes, nearly a 7'11" wingspan, which is just ridiculous. A 9'7" standing reach, which was tied for the best with Donovan Clingan of UConn, and measured in at 299 pounds, which again is no surprise because if you've been following this kid's career, he's been massive the entire time, and he obviously a lot of his draft stock comes from that. But I think with his overall mobility testing, actually beat Alex Sarr in the lane agility drill, beat Donovan Clingan in the three-quarter court sprint drill. Edey really showcased that not only is he a huge, massive human being, but he has really worked hard on his body, has placed himself in a spot where he is really NBA ready to contribute right now as a deep drop coverage pick and roll big man. That's really where you're going to find a lot of value defensively with him, is a deterrent around the rim, just using his natural size, length, and newfound athleticism to really challenge shots around the rack. And then offensively, he's going to be an elite screen setter because of his overall size and his mobility that has been, again, vastly improved from where it was a year or two ago. And then also his hands as a roll man make him a special rim gravity threat as well after the screen. So Edey has really, I think, carved out a real role for himself in the NBA. The comparisons, and he even brought them up himself this week with some of his interview answers. He compared himself to Jonas Valanciunas and Ivica Zubac, and I think those are the exact two comparisons that make sense for Edey from an actual play style, size, athleticism perspective. And I also think it probably presents a good idea into executives' heads on how you can utilize this guy and how he can fit onto a roster, looking at what Zubac and Valanciunas have been in the league for quite some time now. Obviously, Valanciunas an older player. Zubac really started to come into his own the last couple of years. So I think Edey has really worked himself up boards, not only with the way that he's played, the way that he's worked himself into shape, but also just his overall size and his understanding of what his role will be in the NBA, I think are all huge positives for what he's going to turn into moving forward. Then we look at my first loser, and I only have a couple of losers in this video because I don't want to be too pessimistic, but I think Jacoby Walter missed an opportunity here to stand out. In my first video this week, talking about draft combine winners and losers from day one, I highlighted shooters as a big winning group Jacoby Walter just didn't really stand out from the crowd, and I think if he was going to help or improve his draft stock, that was one thing he had to do, was not only shoot it lights out, but really stand apart from some of the other great shooters in this draft, the Reed Shepherds, the Jared McCains, and some of the other obviously very prominent names, Dalton Connect, for example. I just don't think Jacoby Walter, whose primary skill set coming into the league is going to be movement shooting, separated himself from any of those guys, and as a result of it, I do view him as a loser, because a lot of his film, a lot of his game tape is really dependent on him translating to being a shooter in the NBA, something I still do believe can happen, and I'm not pessimistic on that myself personally, but I do think from the eyes of evaluators, they were probably hoping to see a little bit more from him in terms of just sheer dominance as a shooter this week. And with the absence of that, I do think he lost a little bit of stock, a little bit of value, going from what I would have considered early in the year to be a very likely lottery pick to now probably being somewhere in the 20s if he doesn't fall into the second round. Now, I'm not exactly saying that he will fall into the second round. That is not a guarantee. But just with what I think he could have done this week, I feel like he finds himself on the other end of the spectrum where he just lost a little bit of stock, really didn't stand out in ways that he would have wanted to compared to some of those other shooters in this year's draft class. And then loser number 2, I do have Kyle Filipowski here. I highlighted a lot of other big men in this video, talking about Zach Edey, talking about Kel'el Ware. I think Day'Ron Holmes had a pretty good week. I didn't have him listed as a winner, but he had a good week. Adem, Bona, Yves, Missi. Kyle Filipowski, for me, just didn't really stand out a ton. I don't think he really solidified some of the questions on his jump shot. I think he had some streaky moments during the combine shooting drills. And then obviously his play just... I just think he kind of left an opportunity here on the table. Now, I still look at Filipowski as a very likely first-round pick. I had him in the top 20 on my own big board. I do think Filipowski is going to be a quality NBA player. I think really the blueprint for him is Kelly Olynyk. If he can look at and mimic Kelly Olynyk's career, he's going to have a very good one himself. He's got a lot of the similar skill sets. He's actually a little bit bigger than Olynyk, but this week I do view him as a loser. Tested him with a negative wingspan, so his wingspan is actually smaller than his raw height without shoes on, which is very, very, very rare. That never happens usually in the NBA draft combine, because most of these prospects just have ginormous wingspans. But Filipowski actually tested him with a negative wingspan. Just don't really think he helped himself a ton. Now, he measured in decently from a height perspective, but overall, for me, I do think Filipowski was a big loser this week, unfortunately, just compared to some of the other big men who really solidified their cases as either lottery picks, first-round picks, or potential high second-round selections. Filipowski, I felt like, had a real chance to maybe solidify himself as a lottery selection. Just felt like he left that opportunity up for grabs here. Now, I'm not saying he won't be a lottery pick. There's a chance that a team in the late lottery falls in love with him. But I wouldn't be surprised if you say he fell to maybe pick 19 on draft night or pick 20 on draft night to maybe a team like Cleveland. That wouldn't be shocking to me either at this point in time, just based on how the combine just played out in front of us. I hope you guys really did enjoy. Again, let me know down in the comment section below who you thought was a big winner or loser. I couldn't include everybody. I wanted to talk about Ryan Dunn. I wanted to talk about Enrique Freeman more. I wanted to talk about a whole bunch of players. I wanted to talk about Jalen Tyson. There's a lot of guys I wanted to talk about, but for the sake of time in this video, I just couldn't mention every single player I wanted to. So it's your job now to let me know down in the comment section below who you thought had a great week, who had a bad week. Let me know your guys' thoughts on the combine. Really appreciate each and every one of you. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.